So now we're going to be handing it over to our three presenters.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start sharing my screen now.
Vivian, are you there? You're muted.
Oh, sorry, that's what my laptop does. I'm very sorry about that, everybody.
That's fine.
Hello guys, my name is Vivian. I go by she, her, and I'm the co-founder of Passion for Women's Health. And welcome to our workshop on femicide. Just to know, trigger warning, we'll be mentioning sexual harassment, rape, and abuse. Passion for Women's Health is a youth-led organisation which strives to raise awareness for the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically through SDG 3 and 5, and raising awareness through events like this, social media, and articles we publish on LinkedIn. We are trying to start pad drives in the area and beyond, and if you'd like to donate, we'll send the link in the chat at the end of the presentation.
Hey, my name is Maria, and I go by she, her, and I'm the head of research and sometimes do the social media aspect at Passions for Women's Health. In this meeting, we will go through the following: what is femicide and the rates of it? Why does femicide happen and what are the effects? How does the Sustainable Development Goals link with femicide and what can be done? And also including LGBTQ. There will also be interactive questions throughout this workshop, as well as a Mentimeter.
Vivian, just to let you know, you are also still muted.
Sorry, it always does that. Our first activity is to just say how you're feeling. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, someone put excited in the chat and really good. That's good. Okay, so if you don't have any more, then we'll move on to the next activity, which is, what do you know, or what are your thoughts on femicide? I think it might be the same link, but I'll put it again in the chat. Okay, that is the link. So here you just write a little bit about what you know or what are your thoughts on femicide. Something related to feminism and women's rights in the world. The act of killing someone who identifies as a woman. Absolutely. I'm not sure how to explain it, although I have a brief picture that femicide is the harassment, abuse, and danger towards women in all aspects. This could be murder, rape, or assault. Yeah, that's absolutely correct as well. It is the brutal killing of women because of their identity and status in society. It is explained via numerous social political reasons, but also cultural reasons that stem from patriarchy. That is an excellent definition, actually. Okay, we'll do like one or two more and then we'll move on to the actual presentation. Unjust and uncalled for. Yeah, that's so true as well. Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there. Thank you guys for actually like engaging with the Mentimeter. So now I'm going to start sharing the presentation. Okay, so the presentation is on what is femicide? Femicide has been used to describe the killings of women by intimate partners and family members. It has also been used to describe gender-related killings in the community. The term femicide was introduced in the last century to describe the killings of women that were gender-related in order to recognize the impact of inequality and discrimination identified internationally as a root cause of violence against women. The different types of femicide include female infanticide, FGM, Jari-related femicide, murder of women and girls due to sexual orientation or gender identity, intimate and non-intimate violence, honor crime, sexual violence and harassment, and many more.
Now we're going to explain the different types of femicide and its effect. Honor killings is a man relative or other family member kills a woman or a girl over sexual or adulterous behavior to maintain the family's honor. And this primarily occurs in parts of Middle East and South Asia. In India, women often die at the hands of their in-laws if they provide an insufficient dowry. Dowry is a sum of money or goods that a bride pays to a groom's family before marriage. Non-intimate femicide, which is committed by someone who does not have intimate relationship with the victim, is less common but still occurs. Latin America has seen non-intimate femicide rise at alarming rates, according to the World Health Organization. Women who are sex workers or work in nightlife are disproportionately impacted by non-intimate femicide. Female infanticide is when a female baby is killed because they view the son as the financial security of the family. This can be more common in places like China, where they have the one-child rule. Women can die from unsafe procedures like FGM, which is deeply rooted in dominance of women to oppress themselves as they are not able to express themselves as sexual beings. Femicide in the context of human trafficking is another type of femicide. This refers to the killing of a woman in the process of recruitment, transportation, and receipt of women through use of threat, force, and other tactics, as well as abduction, deceit, and or abuse of power with the goal of exploitation. Individuals, particularly women and children, are often trafficked into prostitution or the sex trade industry, forced labor, slavery and practices, and other criminal activities, and there are many more. Our first question is, why do you think femicide happens more often in certain areas?
Okay, so this is a part of the workshop where you guys will put your hand in the chat, and Mariama will like see who's had their hand up, and then you guys can answer the question. Sorry if I say your name wrong. Is it Zeta Zara? You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say this is such a welcome and important workshop, and I'm really enjoying it really. The reason I think it happens in certain areas, or I would say like certain cultural cluster areas, is because of patriarchy, as was mentioned before, but also because of, I don't want to say this in a derisory way, but also because of ignorance and lack of education, because people follow certain traditions that's based on sort of like time immemorial, and sometimes they do it out of ignorance because they don't know better, and therefore it stems from patriarchy. So I would say it happens as a consequence of people maybe not being exposed to something more evolved like feminism, or realizing that things can be done a different way and women are no longer objects and just possession of men. But I also want to be very guarded and careful to qualify that we cannot judge these people with what I call outside criteria, and people have to be invited to the table, and there should be very respectful dialogues to catalyze change and not just imposition and disrespect of culture.
Thank you so much for that detailed answer. I completely agree with what you said, and thank you so much for what you said before. I would say, you know, misogyny and like, yeah, as you said, lack of education does link with these types of practices still happening in certain areas, and as well as they are thinking that it's a part of culture when, you know, say for example, honor killing, that's like a horrific thing to do, you know, killing your daughter because they didn't follow some rules, and they say it's culture when in reality it's a crime and it's horrific. So yeah, thank you so much for your answer. Does anyone else want to say anything?
Rebecca?
Yes, Rebecca, you can go ahead.
I think femicide happens in certain areas more because of traditions. Like, for example, you said killing a girl just because she didn't follow certain rules, and they blame it back on just culture, and they say that, oh, this is just because of the culture, and they keep it going over and over again, that they don't ever want to change it because it's the rules and everyone in the entire area follow it. So why not follow it when everyone else does it? Because it's normal. It's not considered a crime in that area. Because even if in other countries or places people aren't educated, or maybe their countries aren't developed enough to understand that this is wrong, this is a crime, this isn't okay.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with what you said right there. You know, later on in the presentation, we will talk about laws and legislations, but as well as that, it's just the fact that some laws don't protect women at all. Like, they make laws, but they don't how do I put it? They don't enforce that law, and it just makes it seem more acceptable because the police officers or the law enforcement in that country don't particularly tackle it well. Mariel put, by adding to Zeta, maybe because of mentality. Absolutely, yeah, mentality does play a huge role in you know, things like femicide, because later on we'll discuss how like male attitudes and stuff, but I think mentality is very important because, you know, femicide is also deeply rooted in, you know, male dominance of like, and they think they can do as they please to women. So yeah. Yeah, I don't think we'll take any more, but thank you so much. There'll be more questions throughout the workshop anyways. So yeah, the next part is, why does femicide happen? A factor that can contribute to this is misogyny and sexism. Misogyny is the hatred of women and the blatant disregard for women. However, sexism is defined as discrimination based on sex or gender, or the belief that men are superior to women. A person whose sex is either consciously or subconsciously, especially when it comes to the economic, political, or social discrimination of women. So why is this a contributing factor? This is because misogyny and sexism play a huge part in some men thinking that they're superior to women and that they can do as they please. And this encourages violence towards women, and even little sexist jokes can contribute to women's issues not being taken seriously. Our next question is, what can be done to reduce the amount of people with misogynistic viewpoints? So you're invited to put your hands up. Yes, Zeta Zara, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think this is like a really complex question because I think it borders on against like cultural hegemony and then who has the right to impose and who has the right to educate. So I have very personal views which are very rooted in feminism and women and female equality and women liberation. But I sometimes don't know how to sort of, when I say we find how to form a respectful dialogue to go into cultures where they hold certain cultural values. And I wouldn't want to be like a colonizer, you know, to go in and say, this is wrong, this is right, you shouldn't do this. So for me, I believe very strongly in education, because in my country, we don't have a lot of education. But I've seen when educational opportunities are given to marginalized communities or communities who are excluded, how those communities begin to self-heal, self-shape and readapt. And maybe to break it down, to say it more simply, so it's not so verbose. What I mean is, if we start running programs about the role of women, why women should be respected, why education is important, and women start educating themselves and valuing them more, I feel that will catalyze a natural change in society and the status quo. We've seen this with fertility rates in places where people are overpopulated and people are having like 10, 12 children. As soon as the women become educated and there are different community development programs and they are able to go into more urban areas and have different types of jobs and skill sets, the numbers of children naturally decline to 2 or 3. And for me, if we can use that sort of like a mindset and that approach and start practical outreach programs going into those areas where women are seen just as commodities, where they're not educated, where they are marginalized, and start bringing about what I call an educational revolution, I feel that will catalyze the self-change, that the community becomes naturally enlightened as a consequence, and not just like a sort of like a very negative imposition of an outside culture.
Thank you so much for that very detailed answer, and I 100% agree with everything that you said there. I would say education is very, very important. I mean, I live in the UK, so you know, things like femicide doesn't really happen here, but I would say that misogyny, there's a lot of some men that have a misogynistic viewpoint. When the Euros 2020 was going on, there was a spike in domestic violence rates in the home and men beating up their wife because, I don't know, like maybe the team has lost. And I think like that comes, education is the biggest thing. And as you say, we need to like do this tactfully. We don't want to go and act like colonizers and try to say this is wrong, this is this. Instead, bringing it in gradually, because change is, it's not going to happen that fast. Does anyone else have anything to add? Sorry, let me go on the participants. Oh yes, Rebecca, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I think teaching students in school how to not be misogynistic and sexist will help a lot, because like, for example, schoolboys, they aren't like sexist, but let's say misogynistic, because I don't know, they see their fathers or their brothers treating their female family members like this. They're not bad. They just see all their family members treating them like this and they think this is normal, this is okay, especially in the family, in households, relatives. Links back to traditions and cultures. They're so used to it. They don't know that it's wrong, and they've seen it since birth. So it's not something that they can just change. But teaching it in education and in schools will help a lot, because they're still young. And obviously, this is the next generation growing up, working, and we want proper civilized human beings. And teaching them in schools how to not be misogynistic and just treat women like normals, then that would help a lot.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. I think as well, it's about your upbringing as well. Like your upbringing plays a very big role on how you treat women. A lot of the times women are seen as the people who just cook and clean and that's it, and obviously that is not true, and that just derives a lot of like lack of respect for women, which is like really really bad. So I would say, yeah, institutional education in schools is very important, because that's where we learn the majority of the things. So yeah, we are going to move on to the next thing, and Mariana will start speaking now.
Another factor that contributes to femicide is our laws and legislations that limit women's rights. There have been laws put in place to try and protect women, but these simply don't do enough. This is because there are some high-profile femicide cases that are reported, and it takes ages to bring that woman to justice. Furthermore, movements have been made to combat laws and to raise awareness about femicide, but it doesn't have a long-lasting effect. In a lot of countries, there have been a high number of women being reported missing or dead, and not much has been done about it. For example, 18 Latin American countries have passed laws restricting violence against women. However, those laws have not reduced femicide. Government inaction and impunity for perpetrators is attributed to our high femicide rates in several Latin American countries, and 98% of these murders go unprosecuted in the region. Women's rights activists and the families of femicide victims in Mexico have relentlessly tried to seek justice since the spike in missing and murdered young women from jewelry factories in the 1990s, but the government proceeds to downplay the issue. So our next question is, why would legislation be a huge factor to femicide? Yeah.
Zeta Zara, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I think it's very important for countries to have laws in place so that there's safety nets. So even if women are isolated and the immediacy of their community, does adhere to femicide or practice it like an honor killings or stoning of women or something, that they know the country's laws on their side. Because when you have legislation, other things stem from legislation, such as NPOs, NGOs, and the advocacy programs. So if a country can take a national stance and say, we as a country are against this, there'll be other infrastructure in place. So it's not just a law, but it's a positive consequences that stem from the legislation. For example, as I said, NPOs, NGOs, advocacy programs. So therefore, women will begin to have a way out. They know that they are protected. And even though it is something that will be small changes, it means that should they decide to leave or go away with the kids or do something, they know that the laws are on their side and they can be protected.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that, because I've seen a lot of cases like in the media especially, where women are literally getting killed. And there was a famous one recently of this woman called Sarah Everard, and she was falsely, like, she didn't commit any crimes, but she got arrested by this one police officer, and then the guy proceeds to like just kill her on the spot like that. And other things like that have been happening in the country as well. And since the Metropolitan Police, which is the police force in the UK, didn't really push a legislation that made women feel safe, it's just something that is still being tackled. And there's been, police officers, a lot, like 70% of police officers have sexual misconduct crimes, and that is horrible, especially in a country like the UK, which is seen by other countries as a developed country. It is actually horrific how there are police officers who have sexual misconduct crimes and they're not actually being prosecuted or put in prison. And I think a lot of women can't even trust police or law enforcement that well if I think I saw this one thing, 1 in 60 rape cases actually go on to, and that person gets charged. And that's horrible. And I think that it really, really needs to change.
If I could just respond to what you said, I like totally agree, because then the victim doesn't want to come forward, and there's also victim blaming and shaming. Because as you say, we also have corruption in my country with police, and it is horrific because even though the rules, as you said, the laws may be in place, but if there's not like an accountability body or people feeling safe, do you know what I mean? Then sometimes there's victim blaming, and people don't feel strong enough or confident enough to come forward because they're scared of negative repercussions. So it is such a vicious cycle. So maybe, it's not enough just to have legislation, but there should be like watchdogs or people who enforce the legislation. And there should be also a way to basically educate people how to come forward and protect them from being, victim shamed or blamed.
Absolutely. Victim blaming is just one of the worst things. It really annoys me because, a person has been like abused against their own will. And it's the fact that you're instead of blaming the perpetrator for doing that thing in the first place, you blame the person because of what they were wearing, or you blame them because why were they there? And it's just a horrible thing. And I feel like, yeah, we need, even though there is legislation, watchdogs, for example, like you said, they need to enforce what they're saying, because if you don't enforce what you're saying, you are literally losing the trust of the people in the area. So does anyone else have anything to add on? Okay, we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so due to high rates of attacks on women, like sexual harassment, rapes, and murders, this makes women to be scared to leave their homes. One thing that has affected is mental health. And another contributing factor to bad mental health is the invalidation of experiences of the women, whether it be online or in real life. For example, in the media, we have seen the killing of several women because they rejected a man who couldn't take no for an answer, or they were raped because that person, the perpetrator, doesn't know the concept of consent. This can have a negative effect because this makes women not really trust men as much, especially on the streets when they're walking home, and it can cause mental health issues like PTSD, anxiety, depression, and many more. And it comes from experiencing these things or having people in your family go through these things as well. We can see that domestic violence rates have increased during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the World Health Organization has stated that pregnant women are at risk of these types of crimes since they are vulnerable. Our next question is, what things have you heard or seen in the media that invalidates women's experiences? Yes, you can go ahead, Rebecca.
On social media, I've seen a lot of censoring and banning when people are trying to explain their experiences. If a woman is trying to explain an assault case or something, she has to type all those weird capital letters and weird spaces. So then those apps or social media sites can't take it down because they think that it's inappropriate, because they just don't like that and they don't want people to see these types of things. And because this invalidates women, then no one hears about the experience, no one knows anything, no one knows anything happened. And like, for example, on Instagram, if you post something that's maybe has blood in it, then it'll say sensitive information, and then you can press to see it. But sometimes if they find it really bad, they'll just take the entire thing down. And because of that, a lot of women can't share their experiences or explain what happened to them in the past.
Absolutely. The censoring does really get on my nerves when I see it on social media as well. It takes a lot, and I mean like a lot of confidence to tell people in your family, to tell friends, to post it on social media what you've been through. And I feel like it's really invalidating, especially from social media sites, which are supposed to be applications where you can promote certain things or post things. And I feel like it's a bit of double standards, because some things they will leave it on there even though it's very much negative, like racist, sexist, or homophobic things. They won't take it down. But when person or like anybody that's been sexually assaulted or whatever you've been through, you post that on social media, that's when they're going to be like, oh, this is so inappropriate, we're going to take this down. And I think that that's actually really horrible as well. Does anyone else want to add anything? Yeah, Zeta, sorry, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I also was thinking, I don't know how to say this correctly, so maybe people can guide me, but I wanted to go about racial representation in caricatures of women, and especially women of color, and looking at Black women, brown women, or women of color, because sometimes I feel that in the movie industry or even in ads, women are sexualized as objects in a certain racial caricature, which makes it almost okay to say they are just objects, they're just there for sexual like gratification for the ad, and they're not dealt with in the same way. If I can give an example, if you look at something like hair care products, sometimes hair care products for so-called Caucasian or European people who'll be women all like in a nice daisy demure dress, and then maybe a product for like people who have like curly or wild hair like mine, you'll have like the women will be like almost overly sexualized, stilettos on, and she's seen as wild and like an object. And so why I'm saying this is quite subtle, but it's almost like seeing a woman who's not European, of European descent or Caucasian, as them being like overly virile and wild and being like sexually objectified. And they're not seen as people or as women individually and women with their own persona. And I don't know if anyone else has experienced it, but like there were articles about like, on the sexual exploitation of like even like young Black girls, because or not Black girls, but people of color, because like sometimes girls tend to develop earlier in terms of sexual development than the European counterparts. And this is obviously a generalization, but it has been documented. And then these children are actually sexualized from a young age and made as sexual objects. And for me, that does invalidate the sanctity not only of youth but of a woman, and to see them as just as a virile wild object, because then it's almost like giving permission to not see the sanctity and respect the woman in question.
Thank you so much for that. That needs to actually be talked about a lot more. As you were saying about like sexual exploitation, what I wanted to say is that a lot of women of color are hypersexualized in the media, and it's not fair really, because it just makes it seem like we're doing it on purpose or we're doing this for attention, when in reality we're really not. Like and I feel like the representation in films, like when they just display that certain ethnicity, like especially a woman, as the stereotype, that just completely invalidates everything that as a community we go through. So does anyone want to add anything before we go on to the next slide? Okay, then we'll go on to the next part of our workshop. And
what is SDG 5? SDG 5 is a gender equality aims to eliminate all forms of discrimination and violence against women in public and private spheres, and to undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources and access to ownership of property.
How does SDG 5 link with femicide? Well, firstly, the coronavirus outbreak exacerbated existing inequalities for women and girls across every sphere, from health and the economy to security and social protection. The pandemic has also led to a steep increase in violence against women and girls. With lockdown measures in place, many women are trapped at home with their abusers, struggling to access services that are suffering cuts and restrictions. Emerging data shows that since the outbreak of the pandemic, violence against women and girls and particularly domestic violence has intensified. SDG 5 aims to reduce rates of violence towards women by making projects and working with other projects to combat this, either on a small scale or on a large scale. This would be trying to ensure gender-based violence, including domestic violence, are reduced. Social protection and economic stimulus packages serve women and girls properly. People support and practice equal sharing of care work. Women and girls lead and participate in COVID-19 response planning and decision-making and data coordination mechanisms, including gender perspectives. Our next question is, what other SDGs link with femicide and why? Yes, Setazari, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Definitely to end the end poverty and the equality for women, obviously, and children, also education, right to education, and in a way also hunger and poverty, because those are all intertwined. Because when women are uneducated, they don't know their rights and they don't feel empowered. And normally when there's not enough food, I know somebody mentioned like in China with the one child policy, but also I just want to, if I may extrapolate on this, they also in many cultures, regrettably, the girl child, specifically in poorer communities, is seen as less important than the boy child. So if there's not enough food, then the girl child starves. If you have many babies and a girl is born, she's more likely to be given away or unfortunately, just disregarded. But if a boy comes in, he's more highly regarded. So I think it's very important, the education, the poverty, and the gender equality.
You're absolutely correct about that. I would say an SDG that does link to all of this is SDG A about the economy, because what I learn about, because I do GCSE sociology, what we learn about is that women do a lot of unpaid labor in the house and it goes underappreciated. And I just think that more job opportunities for women, because I know that, for example, if a woman wants to become an entrepreneur, they might not be taken seriously if a man wants to become an entrepreneur. So I just think that SDG 8 does link with that and all the SDGs that you've stated, because a lot of women are marginalized and do not have the access to actually, get educated, feed. And as well with the one child policy in China, a lot of baby girls are either like female infanticide, where they kill the girl off or they disregard, neglect. And it's just as I said, education is a very, very crucial thing, and I think it kind of is a starting point as well. Does anyone else want to add anything? Okay, then we'll move on to our next section, which is LGBTQ+, and Mariama will kick it off.
So we'll now go into our next section of LGBTQ. So trans women also experience a disproportionate amount of violence. This is because of their gender identity. Some people might have transphobic beliefs and feel at risk if they fall in love with a trans person. If they were found out to be trans, that person would be in a very dangerous position where they could be beaten up or killed. Black and Latin transgender women are especially at risk of femicide in 2020. Other factors like the heteronormative values that are perpetrated in society, class, race, and more can play a huge role. Most cases of transgender femicide either go unreported or misreported and are usually downplayed by people in power. The NSVRC found that 47% of trans people are uncomfortable for asking the police for help. 57% of them are mistreatment from law enforcement. Almost half of all transgender people have been sexually assaulted at some point in their lives, and these rates are even higher for trans people of color and those who have done sex work, been homeless, or have or had a disability.
Non-binary people also experience violence because of the heteronormative that is prevalent in society today. Most are constantly misgendered and are not taken seriously when they should. The NSVRC found that 57% of non-binary people said they feel uncomfortable asking the police for help. 58% who interacted with law enforcement in the past year experienced mistreatment such as verbal harassment, repeated misgendering, physical assault, or even sexual assault. Lesbian women also experience violence because of fetishization. This is a type of femicide that involves the killing of a woman by a perpetrator or a group of perpetrators motivated by hate or rejection of the woman's sexual orientation. Sexual violence may also be evident in these femicides because the perpetrator believes the victim violated traditional or sexual gender norms. Fetishization can be the thought of the act of of making someone an object of sexual desire based on some aspects of their identity. This is done through things like pornography, but also men attacking women in public spaces because they're simply not attracted to men, or some men thinking everything a woman does is for their own sexual gratification or pleasure when it is not. There have been examples in the media of men attacking women because they didn't kiss for them in that public space. This is an area of research. This is an area that is currently under research, and this is another improvement that needs to be tackled to ensure the accurate rates of lesbian phobic, femicide, and other forms as well.
So our last question is, why do you think intersectionality and inclusivity of marginalized groups is important for accurate statistics?
Yes, Etazari, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I think for me, any form of exclusion is very problematic. And if you look at the LGBTQ community in particular, you're looking at people right now who are fighting not only heteronormative sort of like cultural, sort of like, I would say, hegemony, but they're also fighting what I would call patriarchal colonialist, like a post-colonialist world, which means that they are fighting for representation and recognition. So therefore, when we speak about gender-based violence or femicide, we have to move beyond what I call just a sort of like a heteronormative understanding of femicide. For me, femicide now becomes a blanket term for not only women, but marginalized identities, as you said, binary, non-binary, trans people, and it's recognizing that these identities are very vulnerable and they basically form more easier prey to this kind of violence, gross violence against humanity. So for me, to not include them would be to be falsifying the sort of statistics and falsifying the immeasurable damage and harm done by the mechanism of brutality towards any vulnerable or endangered group of people. So we've got to include their groups and their gender experiences, and when I say non-gender, even if they don't adhere to I'm a man or a woman, so they're non-gendered experiences. Because for me, femicide now becomes, as I said, a blanket term for equality and fighting for a voice for the voices who experience violence. And I think it's very important, because if we don't document their journey, and even if we have to not use specific labels or heteronormative labels or labels that come from past ways of documenting and gathering information, I feel their orality, their stories, their experiences, and just their framework of seeing the world is very important, because otherwise we're going to have a very skewed view of the impact of violence perpetrated towards not only the traditional understanding of a woman, but towards all vulnerable groups. And for me, femicide becomes a platform like Black Lives Matter, not only dealing with Black Lives Matter, but saying, you know what, we have to move away from a world that is post-colonial and only, understands the needs and the representation of people who stem from, say, a colonial past. And for me, this is why femicide is like a voice piece, and it's opening up a darker, deeper, more insidious problem.
Yeah, that is absolutely, I completely agree with what you said right there. I think representation is very important, and there's either bad representation of trans people or like any LGBTQ plus people, or they are misrepresented, or just lack of representation as a whole. And I really think that we need to move past a heteronormative mentality, and I think that inclusion is so important. So like earlier on in this presentation, we talked about invalidation. If we don't include those rates or statistics properly, I think that it just contributes to a lot of marginalized groups feeling invalidated, and that's not what is supposed to happen, especially when we're tackling an issue so prevalent and so horrific as femicide. Does anyone else want to add anything before we move on to the next part? Okay, then we'll move on to the last part of our presentation. So what can be done to end femicide? The World Health Organization suggests collecting more data on femicide is key, and including data of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrators, and strengthening research methods to understand the social context under which femicide occurs. are both essential to protecting women and future acts of violence. Health staff and law enforcement have a role to be trained to better identify intimate partner violence and if a woman is at risk of femicide, especially during pregnancy. Legislation restricting gun access for perpetrators of intimate partner violence, increased number of law enforcement and mandated arrests for violating restraining orders related to intimate partner violence are all considered protective measures against femicide by the World Health Organization. Changing laws to ban honor crimes, FGM, and enforcing punishment for perpetrators is another important step in ending femicide. Improving honor killings education and response in countries and migrant communities where honor killings are common is essential. Funding health and social services to support women and girls especially is crucial to prevent femicide during the pandemic, according to the International Rescue Committee.
Thanks for listening to our presentation and engaging with our workshop. MUN Impact is a global community that believes in the power of model United Nations to inform, inspire, and motivate its participants to action in support of sustainable development goals. During the 2020 and 2021 school year, MUN Impact served over 25,000 students from over 160 countries across the myriad of successful programs. From MUN at Home to OMUN through 100,000 deeds and so much more. Passion for Women's Health is in partnership with MUN Impact and is promoting action and raising awareness for the SDGs.
If you have any questions or queries, you can ask them now or for later, email us at passionforwomenshealth35@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram at passionforwomens.mmv and connect with us on LinkedIn. This will be in our Instagram bio. If you do a deed, please submit it with the link tree in our bio. This is to support us and the partnership we have made with the 100K deeds. If you do a deed, make sure to put it in the Passion for Women's Health bio. If you would like to join our team, the link will be in the chat as well. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation, everyone.
Thank you.
It was such an amazing presentation. I just had to say that. Thank you so much. It was so informative, and I think we really need more presentations like this because especially during the pandemic, I feel that people have regressed in a way because they become more into staying at home, and especially in what I would say less developed countries like my country, and they're forgetting about the greater world out there. And when I say regress, because people are more insular, they can't go out, they can't interact with the greater world. Everyone's becoming sort of more on top of one another, and it's they're going back instead of going forward in terms of gender roles, gender identity. So and that's why there's also a surge in gender violence during the pandemic period. So I would be very interested, if you guys are interested, to explore specifically issues that happen in less developed countries during the pandemic and how to help women or even young girls cope during those periods and know that there are still resources for them out there if they require help.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your feedback and thank you so much for your answers. I really loved your answers today. Yeah, this is the aim of Passion for Women's Health, really, just to be informative, educate people on the issues that women face in society. Right now, I am going to put the link for this is the team membership thing. So if you'd like to join the team, the application is in our Instagram bio, but I'll just put it in the chat right now. And I will also put the, what's it called? The donation link as well, just in case you would like to donate to us.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you for that amazing workshop, Passion for Women's Health. If you guys would like to get in contact with them, feel free to reach out to their email or their Instagram, or reach out to either myself or my co-DSG Rita for any more information about them. But also, thank you guys for that amazing workshop. It was really inspirational and we really enjoyed it. And just before we end this meeting, if you guys could all turn on your cameras so we could get a quick group photo. Once again, this will not be publicized anywhere apart from the internal workspace and our WhatsApp group chat that we have with Vivian. And I'm just wondering if everyone who has their cameras on consents to being on social media if one of our organizations would like to post them. So if you guys could just do like a thumbs up or type yes in the chat, that would be amazing. So on 3, we will take the photo, and then if no one has any questions, I will be ending this meeting. So 1, 2, 3, smile guys. Okay, and that was it. So once again, does anyone have any questions? Okay, if not, I will be ending the meeting here.